Remember the TV series Mission Impossible?
Yeah.
Decades before streaming services were available, Mission Impossible aired on CBS on Saturday night at 10 p.m., at least where I lived. It was on between 1966 and 73. I know this because I had a standing babysitting gig with the McNamara kids, Tara and Megan and Marcus. And by that time, they were all in bed. So I was set with my, really healthy snack of potato chips and soda to watch Mission Impossible. So 23 years later, after the 70s, when the show went off the air, in 1996, the first Mission Impossible movie starring Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, an agent with the IMF, was released. The IMF here, we're not talking about the International Monetary Fund. We're talking, it's an abbreviation for the Impossible Missions Force, a secret, fictional espionage agency engaged in counterterrorism, political subversion, and international crime. And how does anyone remember how each episode of that TV show opened? Listening to a recorded message with Peter Graves, who played Jim Phelps, we heard, "Your mission, should you choose to accept it." And then a few seconds later, the tape sizzles, smokes, and self-destructs. So drama and special effects aside, do we think that the choices we make in our lives, do we think of them as impossible missions or simply what we do every day? The words pilgrimage and mission often connote travel or being sent. Think about your own experience, perhaps where working or living in a different city, country, or culture may have shifted your perspective and offered you priceless insights. In our own community here of St. Mary Magdalene, we have a wealth of pilgrims and missioners whose lives of service continue to inspire me. In fact, our charity this month is the Holy Rosary Sisters in Liberia, specifically the grassroots programs that Ann Kelly and her team facilitate to enhance the lives of Liberian women and children. Shout out to her sisters, Bernie and Terry and Maureen. Have you ever wondered if the anonymous gospel writer that we know as Mark tells us about the mission of the 12 because it is our mission too? In effect, we are invited to be vulnerable, to help others know and enjoy the presence of God during tragic situations, even as we question what's happening in our world. Perhaps your mission is to care for parents or children or grandchildren, or maybe you're being cared for. Perhaps it's collecting food and clothing, or simply taking the time to acknowledge someone at the grocery store. Maybe it's accompanying the homeless, the grieving, or those facing mental health challenges. Perhaps the idea of mission doesn't have to involve physically being somewhere other than where you are. Perhaps the real power lies in how we act, not simply in what we say. Rather than, if you're not welcome, shake the dust from your feet, the Message Bible, the Catholic Ecumenical Edition by Eugene Peterson, offers this translation of that line from today's gospel. If you're not welcomed, not listened to, quietly withdraw. Quietly withdraw. Don't make a scene. Shrug your shoulders and be on your way. Okay, friends, I find that hard to do, but like, I think there's a message there. This countercultural invitation of Jesus to embody a lifestyle of nonviolence, of vulnerability, and hospitality really struck me, considering today's polarized climate of right versus left, both in politics and in religion. If you are not listened to, quietly withdraw. Wow. Imagine doing that when we're talking to someone who interprets things very differently than we do. This past week on a podcast, I heard Shayla Elm, a young woman who lives in Denver, interviewed. She works for the Catholic nonprofit Christ in the City with people experiencing homelessness. Shayla introduced herself as a perpetual pilgrim. She is one of 8 young adults who, along with a priest, a brother, and Jesus, are walking from Brownsville, Texas, headed to the Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis. Shayla's Southern group has been en route for 2 months, stopping in churches and dioceses for rituals, processions, and adoration, typically walking 10 to 15 miles each day. So in 3 days, when the Eucharistic Congress opens in Indianapolis, the perpetual pilgrims arriving from the north and the south and the east and the west branches, because there are groups that have traveled from those 4 parts of the US, they'll arrive, they'll actually converge as Jesus arrives in a large gold monstrance, followed by a procession of miles of men in black. The closing liturgy of the Eucharistic Congress is Sunday, next Sunday at Lucas Oil Stadium, with a capacity of 70,000 people. Roman Catholic women priests have chosen to provide a counter witness with 2 events next weekend. One outside the stadium on Saturday, holding signs that read, "All sacraments for all people." And the second, a hybrid Zoom Eucharist next Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'll shrug my shoulders and quietly withdraw, recognizing that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' goal for the Eucharistic revival and the Eucharistic Congress is to bring Catholics back to churches. That, my friends, feels to me like mission impossible.